The crowd gathered that afternoon expected a controlled demonstration, a carefully managed meeting between a blind veteran and a retired police dog known across 3 states for violence, unpredictability, and a record no handler wanted to discuss. The dog had been labeled too dangerous to reassign, too unstable to trust, and too aggressive to rehabilitate. The veteran, blind from war and forgotten by the country he served, was supposed to be nothing more than a symbolic presence. No one expected what happened next. No one expected the air to change, the handlers to freeze, or decades of fear, trauma, and buried injustice to surface in a single, silent moment. What that dog did next would not only shock everyone watching, but expose how racism, neglect, and broken systems scar both humans and animals in ways few dare to acknowledge. Before the story continues, take a moment to share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Story. Your support helps powerful stories like this reach the world. Elias Monroe had not always been invisible. Once he had stood tall in uniform, his posture straight, his voice steady, his future seemingly secure by promises made in recruitment offices decorated with flags and patriotic slogans. He enlisted young, driven by a sense of duty and the hope that service would grant him dignity in a country that often denied it to men who looked like him. He fought overseas, survived explosions that took the sight from his eyes, and returned home carrying wounds no one could see. When the parades ended and the speeches stopped, Elias found himself slowly erased from public memory. Blindness changed how the world treated him, but race determined how quickly society turned away. The systems meant to protect veterans processed him like paperwork, not a human being. Delays stretched into years. Appointments were postponed. Promises evaporated. Elias adapted because survival had always required adaptation. He learned to walk with a cane, memorized the sounds of traffic near his apartment, and relied on a shrinking circle of people who had not yet drifted away. Meanwhile, several miles away, in a reinforced kennel on the outskirts of the city, another life existed in isolation. The dog's name had once been Rex, though few use it anymore. Official reports refer to him as Unit K, 17, a retired police canine with an extensive bite record. He had been trained for aggression, conditioned to respond to threat cues shaped by bias and fear, and deployed disproportionately in neighborhoods labeled high risk, a label that often meant black and brown communities. Over years of service, Rex had been praised for efficiency and discipline, while quietly absorbing the emotional weight of constant hostility. Each shift reinforced a single truth. The people he was released toward were always framed as dangerous, always treated as enemies. The dog did not understand race, but he understood tone, tension, and violence. He learned to associate certain environments, smells, and movements with punishment and reward. By the time he was retired, his nervous system had been rewired for conflict. Handlers tried to reassign him. Shelters refused him. Rehabilitation programs labeled him a liability. Stories circulated about his unpredictability, how even experienced trainers struggled to manage him. The department quietly decided containment was safer than redemption. Rex became a forgotten asset, locked away and visited only for maintenance. The event that brought Elias and Rex together was not born from compassion, but optics, a nonprofit aimed to raise awareness about service animals and veterans with disabilities. They needed a headline, something dramatic. Someone suggested pairing a blind veteran with a retired police dog as a symbol of healing. The idea moved forward without considering the deeper implications. Elias agreed because he was tired of saying no. Saying yes sometimes led to small opportunities, and sometimes that was enough. He was not told the full extent of the dog's history. He arrived at the demonstration guided by a volunteer, his hearing sharp, his senses alert. He could smell the concrete, the metal, the faint trace of disinfectant carried by the breeze. He felt the tension before anyone explained it. Handlers whispered. Leashes were double-checked. Safety measures were repeated aloud. The dog's presence dominated the space, heavy breathing audible even from a distance. Elias stood calmly, hands relaxed at his sides, his face unreadable. He had learned long ago that fear often invited danger. What no one anticipated was that this meeting would unravel narratives carefully maintained for decades. As Elias stood waiting, memories surfaced uninvited. He remembered patrols overseas, where split-second judgments determined life or death. He remembered how locals were often treated as threats by default, He remembered being warned about dogs trained to detect, to chase, to attack. He remembered the sound of barking in the dark, sharp and relentless, echoing fear into the night. The handlers began their cautious approach. Rex's body language was rigid, muscles taut beneath his fur. Years of conditioning had taught him to scan for cues, to anticipate conflict. The crowd murmured, sensing danger. Cameras were ready. Liability waivers had been signed. Elias raised one hand slowly, not in command, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. His breathing remained steady. He spoke no words, yet his posture communicated something unfamiliar. Rex hesitated. The handlers felt the leash tighten, then slacken. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected. What the audience did not know was that both the man and the dog carried parallel histories of control. Elias had been trained to obey authority without question, to suppress instinct in favor of command. Rex had been trained the same way. Both had been deployed into systems that profited from obedience and ignored the cost. As Rex moved closer, memories stored in muscle and nerve surfaced. The dog detected no aggression, no adrenaline spike, no command to attack. Instead, there was calm, a steady heartbeat, a scent layered with medication, old leather, and something else the dog could not categorize. Vulnerability without threat. The handlers braced themselves. One misstep could confirm every warning label attached to the animal. Rex stopped. This alone unsettled everyone watching. Dogs like him did not pause. They reacted. Elias tilted his head slightly, listening. He could hear the dog's breathing shift. The sound softened. Years of suppressed instinct collided with something unfamiliar. The dog sat down, an action no one had instructed. The crowd fell silent. This was not obedience. This was choice. In that stillness, something profound occurred. Rex leaned forward and rested his head gently against Elias's leg. Not aggressively, not submissively, simply present. Handlers froze. Protocols dissolved. No training manual covered this. Elias felt the weight, the warmth, the quiet pressure. His hand moved instinctively, resting on the dog's head. The fur was coarse, scarred in places. His fingers traced a life shaped by force. Tears welled in Elias's eyes, though he did not yet understand why. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Phones shook. Whispers turned into stunned silence again as Rex remained still, grounding himself against a man who could not see him but somehow understood him. What followed was not immediate applause, but discomfort, because this moment contradicted everything people believed about danger, aggression, and control. The nonprofit organizers tried to regain narrative control, but the footage spread faster than they could frame it. Online debates ignited. Some praised a miracle. Others questioned the risk. Few acknowledged a deeper truth, that both the dog and the man had been shaped by institutions that use fear as a tool. Journalists dug deeper. Reports emerged about Rex's deployment history. Neighborhoods disproportionately targeted. Excessive force incidents justified by canine release. Lawsuits settled quietly. Training methods rooted in outdated theories that reinforce racial profiling. Elias's story resurfaced too. Delayed benefits. Medical neglect. A pattern too familiar to black veterans across the country. The story was no longer about a dog behaving unexpectedly. It was about two survivors of systems that claimed protection while practicing harm. The police department issued statements emphasizing safety. The nonprofit distanced itself. But the public response demanded answers. Why was a dog trained for violence deemed irredeemable, while the system that shaped him escaped scrutiny? Why was a blind veteran celebrated only when his suffering produced a viral moment? As pressure mounted, Rex was removed from isolation and placed under observation. Behavioral specialists examined him not as a weapon, but as a being with trauma. Elias was invited to speak at events, though often his words were edited to fit comfortable narratives. Yet, privately, the connection endured. Elias requested updates about the dog. Advocates pushed for Rex's rehabilitation. Slowly, resistance gave way to reconsideration. The moment that shocked everyone was becoming something else, a reckoning. The turning point came months later during a closed evaluation designed to determine Rex's fate. The department planned to make a final decision. euthanasia or permanent containment. Public pressure forced transparency, though many involved hoped the issue would fade. Elias was invited to attend, not as a symbol, but as a participant. The evaluation took place in a controlled environment stripped of spectacle. No crowd, no cameras, just trainers, officials, and two lives intersecting again. Rex entered first, alert but calm. His movements were slower now, cautious. The months since the demonstration had altered him. For the first time in years, he was not deployed into hostility. His nervous system was learning stillness. Elias followed, guided by memory rather than sight. He could feel the room size through sound, the way his footsteps echoed. He sensed Rex before touching him. This time, there was no leash. The evaluators held their breath. Elias knelt slowly, a deliberate act of trust. Rex approached without hesitation. There was no command, no reward cue. The dog lay down beside him, pressing his body close. The evaluators observed physiological markers. Heart rate stabilized. No stress signals. No aggression. What mattered most, though, was not data. It was recognition. Two beings shaped by coercion had found peace in mutual presence. Elias placed his hand over Rex's chest and felt the steady rhythm. He later described it as grounding, as if both their nervous systems synchronized. In that moment, the labels assigned to them dissolved. Not dangerous, not disabled, not expendable, just alive. The decision that followed was unprecedented. Rex was cleared for rehabilitation placement under specialized care. Elias was offered the opportunity to adopt him as a companion animal with support services. The announcement sparked backlash. Critics argued safety. Others questioned the optics. But momentum had shifted. For the first time, accountability entered the conversation. Training programs were reviewed. Deployment data was re-examined. Veterans advocacy groups used Elias's platform to highlight systemic neglect. Animal behavior spoke openly about how policing practices traumatize working dogs. The climax was not a single moment, but a collision of truths too long ignored. When Elias and Rex left the facility together, it was not triumph that filled the air, but quiet resolve. They had survived systems built without their well-being in mind. Now they moved forward together. Life after the spotlight was slower, quieter, and more honest. Elias and Rex settled into a routine defined by mutual adaptation. The dog learned to guide rather than guard. Elias learned to trust movement beside him again. Their walks became rituals of healing, each step rewriting patterns etched by fear. The public conversation continued to ripple outward. Rex's case became a reference point in discussions about police canine reform. Advocates demanded transparency in training methods and deployment practices. Questions once dismissed gained legitimacy. Elias's story inspired renewed attention to Black veterans disproportionately affected by bureaucratic neglect. Policy reviews followed. Not enough, not fast enough, but cracks formed in walls long thought immovable. What made the story endure was not spectacle, but symbolism rooted in reality. A dog labeled dangerous was not born that way. He was trained, deployed, and rewarded within a system that normalized aggression. A man labeled resilient should not have had to endure neglect to prove worth. Together, they challenged narratives that justified harm. The most powerful impact was unseen. It lived in the way people reconsidered assumptions, the way fear-based labels lost certainty, the way empathy expanded beyond comfort. Elias never claimed the dog saved him. He said they saved each other by being allowed to exist outside the roles imposed upon them. Their story became a reminder that racism does not operate in isolation. It shapes institutions, policies, and even the animals trained within those systems. Healing requires more than moments of shock. It demands sustained accountability. As time passed, Rex aged peacefully. Elias continued to advocate, not as a hero, but as a witness. He spoke about what happens when society chooses containment over care, punishment over understanding. The moment that shocked everyone was never about surprise. It was about truth finally being seen. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you reflect, like this video, share it with others, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Black Voice Story. Because stories like this only change the world when they are heard.